Millions of miles from Earth, a world exists that was never meant for life, a cursed gem, imprisoned by the relentless and cruel chains of gravity. Behold the king of planets, a gas giant that watches over its satellites with a predatory gaze, its massive storms churning like the eyes of a god. From the shadows of this giant emerges Io, a moon that looks more like a rotting fruit than a heavenly body, stained by fire and chemical waste. This is a world of extremes, where the very ground beneath your feet is constantly shifting, responding to the invisible hands of a cosmic executioner above. Welcome to the most volcanic place in our solar system, a landscape defined by violence and the constant threat of total annihilation from the deep underground. The air here is a cocktail of poisons, a thick haze of sulfur that smells of rot and decay, choking any hope for a peaceful existence. Deep within these craters, the heat is unbearable, a simmering rage that waits to be unleashed upon a surface already scarred by 1,000 previous fires. Even the minerals here are hostile, sharp and jagged, formed from the cooling breath of a moon that is literally being cooked from the inside out. Static electricity dances through the toxic clouds, creating ghost-like lights that flicker across the wasteland, a haunting reminder of the invisible forces at play here. Without a significant atmosphere, the eruptions happen in a terrifying silence, a visual display of power that carries no sound to warn the unwary traveler. Rivers of fire carve through the landscape, creating new paths every day as the moon's geography is rewritten by the constant flow of liquid stone. The scale of the environment is humbling, where mountains tall as Everest are dwarfed by the sheer presence of the planet that holds Io captive. Every pool of liquid on the surface is a trap, a boiling vat of chemicals that would dissolve anything it touches in a matter of seconds. From a distance, the colors might seem beautiful, but they are the scars of a world that is constantly bleeding its internal heat into space. Below the surface, the heat only intensifies, a labyrinth of tunnels formed by the constant movement of magma through the crumbling crust of the satellite. Valleys are filled with dense, heavy gases that pool in the lowlands, creating lakes of invisibility that hide the dangers lurking on the rocky floor. There is no peace here, only the relentless industrial-scale activity of a moon that is being squeezed and pulled by the gravity of its giant neighbor. The sun is a distant memory, a weak light that fails to warm the surface, leaving the heat of the core as the only energy source. Some eruptions are so powerful they reach the edge of space, feeding a ring of charged particles that surrounds the entire Jovian system in radiation. The ground is never stable, with constant quakes shaking the foundation, sending massive boulders into the fiery pits that dot the landscape like open sores. Metals and minerals bond in strange ways under this pressure, creating alien textures that defy the logic of any geology found on our home planet. In the distance, the icy moon Europa watches silently, a frozen paradise compared to the hellish landscape that Io is forced to endure every day. The horizon is a blur of heat and poison, where the very atmosphere seems to melt under the intensity of the volcanic fires burning below it. What looks like snow is actually a layer of frozen poison, settling on the rocks during the brief, cold moments between the waves of volcanic heat. Io is a prisoner of the heavens, caught in a cycle of destruction that will continue as long as the giant planet exerts its crushing force. To understand this hell, one must look at the invisible chains. Jupiter's gravity is so immense it physically stretches and compresses the entire moon's body. The solid rock of Io's surface rises and falls like the tides of an ocean, bulging up to 100 meters high in a rhythmic dance. This constant kneading creates incredible friction deep inside, turning the moon's internal structure into a furnace that generates more heat than any other satellite. Europa and Ganymede join the struggle, pulling Io from the other side, turning the moon into a victim of a cosmic tug-of-war that never ends. This tidal heating is the engine of destruction, a relentless source of energy that keeps the core liquid and the volcanoes screaming for release constantly. Mountains are crushed and rebuilt in the blink of a cosmic eye, as the crust is too thin to resist the power of the internal pressure. When the pressure becomes too great, the crust snaps, allowing the molten heart of the moon to bleed onto the surface in spectacular, deadly displays. Below the surface lies a sea of liquid stone, a hidden ocean of fire that is constantly being churned by the invisible hands of gravity's might. The moon is literally venting its internal stress, gasping for air as it is crushed by the weight of its own celestial prison in the void. Imagine a world that is being shaken by an earthquake that never stops, a vibration that resonates through every atom of its being for eternity. Solid ground is an illusion here, as heat can turn stone to liquid in an instant, creating a shifting trap for anything trying to stand. The entire moon is a wounded animal, groaning under the weight of the giant's embrace, its body covered in the glowing scars of its survival. Beyond gravity, an invisible tube of energy connects the moon to its master, carrying millions of amperes of electricity back and forth through space. Every crater is a witness to the struggle, filling with fire as the moon tries to release the energy that is being forced into it. At the microscopic level, the destruction is total, as the very structure of the rock is dismantled by the friction of the tidal force's grip. When the crust finally gives way, the release is explosive, sending molten rock high into the vacuum, where it cools into black glass shards instantly. A landscape of constant change, where mapmakers would find their work obsolete in a single day, as new mountains rise and old ones vanish forever. The lava flows with a terrifying speed, driven by the pressure of the core, consuming everything in its path with a hunger that is never satisfied. Exotic fires burn here, fueled by gases that would not exist on a colder world, painting the darkness with colors of pure, chemical energy's light. The moon has a heartbeat, a pulse of molten fire that matches its orbit around the giant, a rhythm of destruction that has lasted for billions. As the plumes fall back, they bury the land in toxic dust, a perpetual cycle of burial and resurrection through the medium of fire and chemicals. Nothing is permanent on Io. The very peaks of the mountains are susceptible to the shifts of the moon's unstable and tortured volcanic internal structure. Geysers of liquid sulfur erupt with the regularity of a machine, spraying the landscape with a fine mist of cooling stone and acidic chemical compounds. The surface is a thin shell, a fragile crust over an ocean of magma, making every step on this world a gamble with a fiery death. Other moons cast their shadows here, briefly cooling the surface, but the heat from below never stops its relentless assault on the moon's thin crust. The rock itself is born of fire, cooling into geometric shapes that seem too perfect for such a chaotic and violent world of planetary destruction. Atmospheric static discharges in massive bolts of lightning, connecting the ground to the toxic clouds in a display of raw, uncontrolled, and primal electrical power. Fields of glass shards stretch for miles, formed when the magma hits the cold vacuum of space, creating a landscape that would cut anything apart. Molten sulfur flows like water here, a toxic substitute for the life-giving liquid of Earth, carving its own paths through the dark, subterranean volcanic caves. Lava falls cascade over cliffs of black rock, a majestic and terrifying sight that no human eye was ever meant to see in this reality. The battle between extreme heat and the cold of space is fought on every inch of Io, a constant struggle that defines its hellish existence. Now, we approach the heart of the nightmare, Terra, the largest lake of liquid magma in the entire solar system, a true ocean of fire. Islands of stone float on the sea of fire, moving slowly like ghost ships on a journey to nowhere, across a surface that never stops burning. Waves of molten rock crash against the shores of this lake, driven by the thermal currents that rise from the moon's superheated and tortured interior core. The lake breathes out a thick, glowing fog, a toxic cloud that hides the scale of this inferno from the cold and distant stars of space. Every few hundred days, the surface of the lake turns over entirely, a massive wave of fresh magma rising to replace the cooling crust above it. Bubbles of sulfur gas burst on the surface, releasing energy and poison into an environment that is already saturated with the sense of a burning world. Natural arches of scorched stone stand as monuments to the moon's violent history, slowly being melted back into the lake from which they were born. The horizon is a line of fire, a constant source of light that turns the night of Io into a dim, orange-hued hell of eternal visibility. To enter this fog is to vanish. The gases are so thick and corrosive, they would eat through the toughest materials known to human engineering. The resurfacing is a spectacle of destruction, a wave of liquid heat that consumes the old surface and starts the cycle of cooling all over again. Even the solid parts are temporary, just a thin skin over a monster that is always moving, always hungry for more of the moon's crumbling crust. Chimneys of minerals grow around the edges of the lake, built by the breath of the moon as it exhales its internal heat into the void. Everywhere you look, there is liquid death. This is not water, it is a chemical soup that would destroy any life that dared to exist. From orbit, Loki Patera is a dark scar on the moon's face, a constant reminder of the incredible energy being released from its tortured internal depths. The edges of the lake are lined with glass, a razor-sharp shore that makes this environment as physically dangerous as it is chemically toxic to life. Giant bubbles of gas rise from the depths, bursting with enough force to send ripples across the entire lake, shaking the foundations of the mountains. The land itself is flowing back into the fire. It is a world that is recycling its own body in a desperate attempt to survive gravity. Sometimes the fire turns blue, a ghost-like flame that dances in the dark, signaling a different kind of chemical hell rising from the moon's interior. Night on Io is never truly dark. Near Loki, the lake provides a constant, sickly light that illuminates the clouds with the colors of an apocalypse. Above the lakes, the plumes rise. These are not clouds of water, but pillars of frozen gas that stretch far beyond the limits of the moon. Like giant white mushrooms, these plumes dominate the sky, their shapes dictated by the lack of wind and the pull of the moon's weak gravity. Snow falls on Io, but it is a blizzard of sulfur, a yellow powder that covers the landscape in a soft, yet deadly and corrosive chemical blanket. In the cold regions, the gases freeze instantly, creating a world of white frost that hides the fiery nature of the moon's core just beneath it. Lightning strikes within the plumes themselves, generated by the friction of falling sulfur crystals in a display of atmospheric violence that is truly unique to Io. The rain is acid, a liquid that eats away at the stones, shaping the landscape through chemical erosion as much as the volcanoes do through heat. Dunes of yellow dust shift under the thin winds, a desert of poison where nothing can grow and no living thing could ever hope to survive. Particles of dust are stripped of their electrons, becoming part of the massive electrical current that connects Io to the magnetic field of giant Salmak. Sometimes the plumes carry the weight of the moon's heart, ash and dust that turn the sky as black as the void that surrounds this world. The very ground is exhaling, a constant release of pressure that turns the surface into a porous and unstable shell over a boiling and angry core. Crystals grow in the toxic air, forming forests of yellow spikes that would crumble at a touch, yet stand as monuments to the chemical riches. The atmosphere is so thin, it is almost non-existent, a ghost of a layer that fails to protect the surface from the radiation of the universe. Red sulfur indicates a different temperature, a different level of hell, boiling with a fury that matches the red storm of the giant planet above. The plumes are the moon's only voice, a silent scream of gas and ash that tells the story of its eternal struggle against the forces of gravity. Ice and fire live side by side. Here, a contradiction of nature that could only exist in the shadow of the most powerful planet in our system. Every horizon on Io is active. There is never a moment of stillness, never a second where the moon is not being torn apart and rebuilt. The cycle of material is complete, from core to sky, and back to the fire, a perpetual motion machine of destruction and geological transformation for Io. Time seems to stand still in these frozen flows, yet they are just waiting for the next surge of heat to turn them back into liquid. You cannot breathe, you cannot see, you can only exist for a few moments before the moon's toxic breath claims you as part of itself. Beyond the fire and the poison, there is an invisible killer. Jupiter's magnetic field is a trap that catches high-energy particles and hurls them at Io, The radiation here is not just a number. It is a physical force that bombards the surface with the energy of 1,000,000 nuclear reactors constantly. If you were to stand here, your cells would be torn apart in seconds. No suit could protect you from the invisible rain of deadly ions. The sky glows with a ghostly light, an aurora that never fades, fueled by the millions of volts of electricity that pulse through the moon's atmosphere. The sensors scream before they die. The level of radiation on Io is thousands of times higher than what is needed to kill a human being. Io feeds the giant. It loses a ton of material every second, creating a ring of plasma that glows with a cold and lethal purple light. Lightning from space strikes the ground, as the magnetic field of Jupiter uses the moon as a target for its massive electrical discharges and energy. Even the stones are not safe. The radiation breaks the bonds between atoms, slowly turning the solid surface of the moon into a fine, radioactive powder. The moon and the planet are connected in a deadly dance. Every eruption on Io sends a signal to Jupiter's poles, sparking fires in its atmosphere. You are traveling through a river of fire that cannot be seen, a path of energy that would destroy any spacecraft that dared to linger here. This is why we have seen so little of Io. Its environment is so hostile that our machines fail, their eyes blinded by the invisible radiation rain. Life is a fragile thing, and Io is the antithesis of life. It is a world that dismantles the very building blocks of biological existence effortlessly. The particles are invisible, yet they are everywhere, a constant pressure of energy that turns the entire moon into a giant, glowing electrical conductor. Even in the dark, Io is never black. It glows with the energy of its own destruction, a faint blue light that marks its place in space. The chemistry of the moon is changed by the radiation, creating isotopes and materials that would be impossible to find anywhere else in the galaxy. Even the light of the sun is distorted as it passes through the toxic ring, a filter of radiation that turns the day into a nightmare. This is the power of a giant. Io is simply a component in a cosmic circuit, a world being used as a wire for planetary energy. Our technology is useless here. The radiation burns through shielding like it's paper, leaving us blind in the face of this hellish, volcanic moon's power. The sky is a battlefield of light, where the magnetic field of the giant planet Salmak fights to control the gases escaping from the moon. Touch the ground, and you would be electrocuted. The surface of Io is a live wire, pulsing with the power of 1,000,000,000 lightning bolts. Io is bleeding its soul into space, its very atmosphere being stripped away and turned into a weapon of radiation by the giant planet Salmak. Through the glass and the fire, the radiation continues its silent work, turning a beautiful and terrifying scene into a graveyard for any living potential. Small explosions happen every second as the invisible rain hits the frozen pockets of gas, a microscopic war that never ends on this moon's surface. The fire itself becomes radioactive, carrying the poison of the magnetic field into the very heart of the moon's volcanic and fiery underground system. Even in the shadow, there is no escape. The radiation doesn't need light to kill, and the moon continues to glow with its own internal fury. We are looking at a world that has been dismantled and turned into a ghost of itself, a ring of light that haunts the Jovian system. Wind doesn't shape these rocks. The radiation does. It is a slow, invisible erosion that wears down the moon atom by single atom over time. The giant planet watches through the haze, its red eye, a symbol of the power that created this hell and continues to sustain its fire. The power of a sun is contained within these fields, a level of electrical energy that is almost impossible to comprehend for a human being. The ground itself reacts to the space weather, as if the moon is sensing the coming assault from the magnetic field of its massive giant master. This is the true face of the universe, not a place of peace, but a place of raw power, where life has no place to hide. At the edge of these cracks, the two hells meet, the fire of the core and the invisible death from the stars of the universe above. Every collision is an explosion, every particle a bullet. This is the bombardment that never ends, the trial that Io must endure for eternity. The solid turns to gas in an instant, a ghost of a material that was once part of the moon's surface before being claimed by radiation. The sky is divided by a bridge of light, a path for the gods of energy to travel, while the moon below burns in their cold wake. Nothing remains functional here. The radiation is the ultimate eraser, wiping away the complexity of our machines and the possibility of any biological life. This is a world that has been conquered by the forces of the universe, a monument to the power of gravity and the cruelty of space. In the heart of the storm, there is only energy, a pure, raw form of existence that is as beautiful as it is utterly and totally lethal. We enter the climax of this symphony, the great volcanoes. Pele, named after the goddess of fire, is a monster of unparalleled scale and power. The red ring is her mark, a circle of ash that stretches for hundreds of miles, evidence of a plume that reaches the very edge of space. When Pele speaks, the entire moon listens. The sheer volume of material thrown into the air is enough to change the weather on a global scale. Marduk follows, a chaotic system of fire that never rests, its multiple vents working together to drown the land in a sea of liquid stone. The flows are miles wide and hundreds of miles long, a river of fire that would take months to cross, if you could even survive the heat. The moon is in a state of permanent labor, giving birth to new land through the pain of its own internal and violent volcanic contractions of rock. A forest of fire and ash, where the sky is filled with the debris of a moon that is literally turning itself inside out for our observation. History is buried here. Every ancient mountain is eventually consumed by the newer flows, leaving no trace of what once stood on this tortured moon's face. The air is filled with glass. To breathe here would be to fill your lungs with razor-sharp shards that would cut you from the inside out. The power is felt even through the vacuum, a vibration that shakes the very atoms of the moon as it releases its incredible, pent-up internal pressure. Nothing can outrun this, a wall of heat and ash that moves with the speed of sound, erasing everything in its path in a heartbeat of fire. The cracks open like wounds, bleeding, a fire that never stops, a curtain of light that marks the boundary between the surface and the deep. Hell. The patterns of death are intricate, a design created by the cooling of the moon's blood as it tries to find a temporary state of peace. There are moments when the entire moon seems to catch fire, a global catastrophe that reminds us of the raw power of the Jovian satellite system. In the heart of the ash, there is only darkness, a place where the light of the sun and the giant planet are swallowed by the moon. The architecture of Io is a house of cards, constantly falling and being rebuilt as the fires below carve out the foundations of the world above. The chemistry of destruction is colorful, a palette of oranges, yellows, and purples that hide the true nature of the violence being done to the moon. As the sun sets, the plumes become pillars of gold, a brief moment of beauty in a world that is otherwise defined by its hellish and toxic. In the dark, the moon's true face is revealed, a web of fire that covers the entire sphere, the veins of a creature that lives in hell. The light is ancient, energy from the birth of the system, released through the torture of the moon's orbit around its massive and cruel giant planet. Every hotspot is a volcano, a point of light in the darkness that marks a place where the moon is bleeding its internal heat into the space. The night is never quiet. The sound of the moon cracking and the roar of the fire are a constant symphony of destruction in the dark void. White heat marks the points of greatest pressure, places where the moon is being torn apart by the invisible hands of the giant's gravity and field. A world of treasure made of fire, a fortune of heat that can never be claimed by anyone but the moon itself in its lonely orbit. Io is a lantern in the dark, its fires powerful enough to cast a glow on the giant planet that holds it in its gravitational and cold. Even the impacts from space are minor compared to the internal fury of the moon. This is a world that destroys itself from the inside out. The yellow ice melts and burns, a battle of elements that plays out every night on the surface of this volcanic and chemical nightmare moon world. The two hells of Io are visible at once, a horizon of fire and a sky of radiation, a complete environment of death for all life forms. A beacon of destruction, signaling to the stars that this world is not for the weak, but a place of raw, uncontrolled, and truly primal power. Even in the cold, the heat remains, a simmering power that waits for the next gravitational surge to burst forth and reclaim the surface for fire. Io is a reminder of the universe's cruelty, a place where beauty is born from destruction, and light only comes from the fires of a hellish. We leave this world of fire and poison, a satellite that has endured the unendurable for billions of years in the shadow of its massive master. The ghost of Io remains in the ring of light that surrounds Jupiter, a testament to the moon's sacrifice at the altar of gravitational power and energy. A final breath of poison, a last look at a surface that will never know peace or the touch of a gentle, life-giving breeze from home. The dance of the moons continues, a complex and deadly game of gravity that keeps the fires of Io burning through the eons of cosmic time. Do not look for life here. In the heart of Io, life is an insult to the power of the universe, a defiance of its laws. This hellish moon will continue its lonely scream in the dark, a world of fire that is as beautiful as it is utterly and totally deadly. A last spark of defiance, a final signal from the most active world in our solar system before it is swallowed by the eternal silence of space. Its shadow is its only reach, a brief mark on its master's face that soon vanishes, just like any hope of life on its own surface. In the end, there is only the silence of the void, a cold and indifferent witness to the billions of years of volcanic rage on this moon. The light is a memory, the warmth a dream, leaving only the internal fire to sustain this world against the infinite cold of the deep space. Loki watches, the eye of the demon that is Io, a permanent scar of fire that will never be healed by the passage of cosmic time. We are but visitors to this hell, a brief glimpse into a reality that is far beyond our understanding and our ability to survive or inhabit. The scale of the universe is vast, and Io is but a tiny, burning speck in a sea of darkness, a small tragedy in an infinite cosmos. The heartbeat of the moon, the pulse of its fire, fades into the background noise of the universe, a signal lost in the vastness of space. The power remains, invisible and deadly, a force that will outlast any observer and continue to shape the destiny of the hellish moon named Io. Remember, Io, not as a destination, but as a warning. A world where the laws of nature are written in fire and chemicals and radiation. The final spark dies, the fire remains, and the moon continues its lonely journey through the hell of its own making in the Jovian system. Into the dark it goes, a world of fire in a sea of ice, a testament to the incredible and terrifying diversity of our own solar system. The glass world remains, a sharp and deadly monument to the power of the volcanoes that built it from the moon's molten and internal heart. The radiation is the final guard, the invisible wall that ensures no life will ever touch the surface of this volcanic and toxic nightmare moon. The squeeze continues, every second, every minute, for billions of years. The giant planet Salmak continues to torture its small, volcanic, and fiery satellite. The prison is vast, the sentence is eternal. Io is the captive of gravity, a world that can never escape the reach of its master. The eyes of humanity are closed. The signals stop. The radiation wins, leaving the moon to its own private hell in the dark Jovian system. A world of chaos, a world of fire, a world of death. This is Io, the most hellish place in the entire solar system's dark reaches. Farewell to the hell of Io. May its fires forever burn in the silence of the void, a lonely sentinel of the universe's raw power.